At 64, Prince Andrew finally broke decades of silence in a confession so shocking in its content and so deliberate in its timing that it sent ripples of outrage across the globe. Because until now he had denied knowing anything of substance about Jeffrey Epstein's activities, repeatedly insisting he never saw signs of wrongdoing, never met underage victims, and certainly never understood the full pattern of trafficking that clutched at him now. But today, he revealed that Epstein had once described to him a young girl in chillingly explicit terms, characterizing her as seasoned, pliant, and underage, noting that she was compliant and accepted hospitality without complaint, and that Andrew, sitting quietly in the same room, heard every word and did not walk away, did not alert authorities, did not publicly disavow the description, and instead froze, disoriented, unwilling to insult Epstein or risk scandal later calling his own silence a mistake, an error of judgment rooted in ignorance and fear. But the world listened in horror and disbelief because the admission peeled back not just one conversation, but an entire system of elite disregard, an arrangement where silence became protection, where loyalty to powerful friends was weighted over moral responsibility, and where a royal's refusal to act allowed unspeakable harm to continue unchecked. His words, delivered with carefully measured remorse, have reopened questions about every private meeting between them, every social gathering, every yacht trip, every dinner, in these once trusted circles, and critics argue that knowing a girl was underage and remaining in that room, hearing that, goes beyond scandal, it goes to criminal exposure, especially given that in many legal systems, failing to report knowledge of child sexual exploitation is itself a crime. Even as Andrew emphasizes that he misinterpreted Epstein's remarks and believed he was speaking figuratively. Many observers say that's implausible in light of multiple earlier complaints against Epstein, documented intelligence reports, flight logs naming Andrew's travel on Epstein's private jet, and witness statements indicating Andrew's presence at gatherings where underage girls were allegedly trafficked. The admission triggered demands not just for apologies, but for archival transparency, unsealing emails, guest registers, flight manifests, and legal documents tied to Epstein that mention Andrew so that the public can finally see what he knew and why he purportedly withheld it. Calls for parliamentary inquiries in the UK, Congress briefs in the US, and judicial proceedings in the Caribbean intensify, with lawmakers and lawyers citing his admission as insufficient without documentary proof. In a stroke, Andrew's long-held privilege, his royal immunity, his access to discreet counsel, his cloistered status became evidence of a larger problem: how institutions prioritize reputation over responsibility. Advocacy groups, survivors networks, and aid organizations declare this moment a turning point, demanding more than statements. They want action, justice, and a demonstration that hearing wrongdoing does not allow moral blindness to prevail. Analysts note that Andrew's admission, while painful, may be interpreted as a legal fulcrum. A recognition of his knowledge may open doors to perjury charges, obstruction inquiries, or negligence suits if he withheld crucial information. As a result, Palisades are reportedly scrambling to manage fallout, some urging complete cooperation with authorities, others pushing for damage control. But one thing is clear: the confession has changed Andrew's legacy fundamentally. He is no longer just royalty who stumbled in judgment. He is now a symbol of the cost of silence, a cautionary tale of how title and proximity to power don't excuse ethical inaction. Public media, from tabloids to national broadcasters, captured reactions ranging from condemnation to reluctant sympathy, but even those inclined toward compassion agreed that hearing such statements and standing still demands reckoning. Social media hashtags demanding transparency trended within hours. People calling not just for legal accountability, but for emotional clarity. Who was the woman? Why no mention until now? What other names did Epstein whisper about that Andrew ignored? Meanwhile, royal correspondents began tracing links to previous media mentions, collating data from flight logs, published affidavits, and Epstein's black books, creating a timeline that contrasts Andrew's previous defenses with this newly confirmed knowledge, revealing how certain lines of questioning were evaded, how opportunistic silence was allowed to bloom into cultural complicity, even within palace walls. Confidants reportedly compare the moment to Edward VIII's abdication, calling it a crisis of authority and lawyers. Several jurisdictions now see the possibility of Andrew being subpoenaed for testimony in cases. Yet despite the chaos of his admission, survivors' advocates cautiously view it as the long-awaited opening, a pivotal moment allowing them to reconnect with legal avenues blocked by royal obstruction, and to demand the naming of victims who were previously protected by anonymity or buried reputation. In interviews soon after his statement, Andrew spoke of regret and said his royal standing led him to fear scandal more than he feared inaction. While some call that courage, most call it cowardice, arguing that moral clarity, not denial, would have been required. Psychologists affirm he may be suffering from PTSD-like paralysis triggered upon hearing of extreme allegations from someone he trusted. But they stress that professional ethics demand immediate response, not avoidance, especially when vulnerable lives are at stake. Meanwhile, press advisors are tweaking Andrew's public image. Some suggest he issue a formal letter to victims. Others recommend ceremonial withdrawal from public duties to allow time and space for legal cooperation. Spiritual counselors urge him to perform symbolic acts of restitution. But survivors want substance: recovery funds, judicial cooperation, gift of evidence to investigative bodies. For many, the image of Andrew in fabled golden cufflinks now feels grotesque, a figure eternally linked to a scandal he neither prevented nor condemned for years, and who finally spoke only under mounting pressure. Yet others find a sliver of hope. Perhaps this admission, painfully reluctantly voiced, can serve as a deterrent, inspiring other powerful people to break silence in their own lives, to step forward sooner, to choose courage over some. Historians already note that Andrew's legacy splits neatly. Before admission, he was a scandal-tinged footnote in royal history. After admission, he becomes a test case of privilege and moral justice. Cultural observers reference his confession as a moment when royalty met accountability, the kind of story once unimaginable in royal biography. And as Andrew now traverses a labyrinth of investigations, public anger, legal threats, and personal regret, the broader public grapples with larger truths about wealth, secrecy, and power. How Epstein's circle enabled predators, and how silence, by the elite, intensifies suffering. So while Andrew sees himself stepping toward disclosure, critics see him only inches at a crossroads, speaking with restraint, hoping for absolution, but still withholding key details, turning a confession into a stuttering beginning rather than closure. At 64, Prince Andrew finally admitted what Epstein said, but the world now demands far more than words. It demands justice, transparency, and a willingness to name the girl he mentioned, not as abstraction but as a person. And only then can this confession become more than a delayed echo. It can become a turning point in the fight to break privilege's grip on secrecy, and the world watches insistently, as accountability no longer feels optional but inevitable.
Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon.